The envelope wasn't even addressed to me. Not really. It had Jolene's name on it, my mother's, and then, in smaller print, and occupant. It had been sitting on the counter for a week. Just another piece of junk mail, probably, mixed in with the takeout menus and the usual bills that Peregrine, my dad, always left for someone else to open. He'd never been one for managing the paperwork, or much else, really, when it came to anything that wasn't directly related to his job, which, for the last year, he hadn't even had. But this envelope felt heavier than junk mail. It was from some obscure lending company I'd never heard of, not the usual bank. My gut just tugged. I picked it up, turned it over in my hands a few times, wondering if it was even my place to open it. I'm 30 now, still living in the house sometimes, mostly since Peregrine lost his job. Helping them out, you know. But it's still their house. Or it was. I slid it open with the dull edge of a butter knife. The kind with the wooden handle that Jolene insists on keeping, even though it's seen better decades. Inside was a statement. One of those dense, legalese-heavy documents that usually make my eyes glaze over. But something jumped out almost immediately. A loan number, a property address, our address. And then, right there, under the borrower's name section. It wasn't just Jolene and Peregrine. There was a third name. My name. Reese Sterling. My heart didn't pound. No dramatic thrumming in my chest. It felt more like a slow, cold, spreading sensation, starting behind my ribs and moving outwards, making my skin feel tight, my fingers almost numb. A disconnect? Like looking at a photo of yourself but not quite recognizing the person in it. This couldn't be right. There had to be a mistake. I flipped through the pages, my vision tunneling to just those few words. Mortgage statement, home equity loan, borrower, Reese Sterling. The date. The date. That's what really caught me. It wasn't recent. It wasn't last year when Peregrine lost his job, or 5 years ago when I finally moved out for a bit before drifting back. Number. The date on the original loan agreement, referenced right there in the small print, was from when I was 17. 17. I remembered turning 18. The big fanfare, the sense of adult freedom that came with it, even though I was still just a kid planning for college. But 17? How could I have signed for a mortgage when I wasn't even legally an adult? The numbers blurred together, the interest rates, the principal, the outstanding balance. All of it just became a meaningless jumble, overshadowed by that one stark, impossible fact. My name. On their house. From before I was legally old enough to even buy a lottery ticket, let alone co-sign a loan for a property. The quiet of the house pressed in, suddenly suffocating, full of unspoken things, of shadows I hadn't seen before. My parents, Jolene and Peregrine, what had they done? And why in the world was I only finding out now, 13 years later? The air felt thin, like I'd just been plunged into freezing water. All the breath knocked out of me, leaving just a sharp, aching hollowness. This wasn't just a financial problem. This was bigger. So much bigger than just unpaid bills. It's funny how something can feel so solid, so unshakable, and then just dissolve, like the bedrock under your feet suddenly turning to sand. My whole life, Jolene and Peregrine were just parents. Not perfect, nobody's are, but they were my parents. The house, this house in Meadowbrook, always felt like a constant. I'd grown up here, learned to ride my bike on the street outside, scrape my knee on the cracked paving stones by the back door 100 times. They met back in '89, I think Jolene told me once, at a dive bar called the Rusty Nail out near the old industrial park. Before it got gentrified into artisanal coffee shops and microbreweries. Peregrine was a sound engineer, freelancing for local bands. Kind of a free spirit. Jolene was waitressing, trying to save up for a proper photography course, always with a sketchbook tucked under her arm. They were both in their mid-20s, full of that hopeful, slightly aimless energy of youth. My mom always said it was Peregrine's laugh that drew her in first. Loud, infectious, the kind that made everyone around him smile, even if they didn't know what was funny. He had this wild dark hair then, apparently, before it thinned out and went mostly gray around his temples. She, Jolene, was all sharp edges and quick wit with eyes that saw everything. They got married pretty fast, within a year. A small ceremony in some park, just a handful of friends. I came along a few years later, in 1993. My earliest memories are mostly of the hum of Peregrine's stereo, always playing something obscure and loud. And Jolene's camera, a clunky old Pentax, always pointed at something or someone, including me. Dad was good at his job, really talented. He'd bring home these big, complicated soundboards sometimes, and he'd let me press the buttons, slide the faders, making strange noises. He made decent money, enough that Jolene didn't have to waitress anymore after I was born. She eventually opened a small photography studio, mostly portraits and some local event stuff, but it never really took off the way she'd hoped. It stayed more of a passion project than a career. Life was comfortable, routine. Saturdays were for Peregrine's endless garage projects. He was always fixing some vintage amp or trying to rewire the outdoor lights. Sundays were for Jolene's elaborate brunches, usually involving lopsided pancakes and bitter coffee. We'd go to the same beach every summer, Cape Henlopen, stay in the same old motel with the squeaky beds. It was stable, predictable. And because it was, I guess you just take that stability for granted. You don't question the foundations when the house feels warm and dry. Looking back, there were always little things. Peregrine's approach to money was, let's say, laissez-faire. He'd get a big gig, and there'd be a splurge, a new guitar, a fancy lens for Jolene's camera, a ridiculous gaming system for me. Then there'd be leaner times where Jolene would subtly stretch the grocery budget, and we'd eat a lot of pasta and lentils. She was always the practical one, the one who tried to keep the accounts balanced, but Peregrine had this way of charming his way around any serious conversation. "It'll work out, Joe," he'd say, with that big, reassuring smile. We always make it work. And for a long time, they did. There were a few times Jolene would get frustrated, I remember. Once when I was around 11, she found a stack of unopened bills, hidden in Peregrine's workshop, tucked under a pile of old wiring diagrams. I heard them arguing, not shouting, but that low, intense kind of argument, where the words are sharper than yells. "Peregrine, you can't just ignore these things. We have a child. We have responsibilities." He'd respond with some vague promise, some grand plan about a big project coming up. And Jolene eventually would just sigh, shoulders slumping, and take on the task of sorting through the mess. I guess I just thought that was their dynamic. She worried, he reassured. Things got fixed. I just thought it was normal, how couples balanced each other out. Another time, when I was 15, Peregrine invested a chunk of their savings, Jolene's savings, into a friend's dubious online music streaming startup. It tanked spectacularly within 6 months. Jolene was devastated, quiet for weeks. Peregrine just brushed it off. "Live and learn, eh, Joe? We'll make it back." And he had this incredible ability to just move on, to not dwell. I admired it even. Saw it as resilience. Now, I wonder if it was just a fundamental inability to face consequences. I saw it as a difference in temperament. Jolene was the worrier, Peregrine the dreamer. Never once did I think, not once, that these weren't just quirks, but maybe signs of something far more systemic, something that would eventually unravel everything. Until that envelope with my name on it, sitting there on the kitchen counter like a ticking bomb, I didn't even know was armed. 17. How could I have been so blind? We all were. I sat there, the crumpled statement in my hand, staring at the numbers, the dates, my name. My parents were out, probably at the grocery store, maybe running errands. I couldn't just confront them the second they walked through the door. I needed to figure out what to say, what questions to even ask. My mind was a whirlwind of half-formed accusations and desperate rationalizations. Maybe it was an identity theft thing, though the address was ours, the loan was tied to the house. Maybe it was a clerical error. Maybe they just messed up innocently. That last thought felt flimsy, even to me. When they came back, Peregrine whistling some old tune, Jolene with a bag of organic kale she'd been raving about, the world suddenly felt performative, like I was an actor in a play I hadn't rehearsed for. I waited until after dinner, after we'd talked about my cousin Esme's new baby, after Peregrine had rambled about a documentary he'd watched. The normality of it all was sickening. Finally, as Jolene was clearing the plates, I just laid the statement on the table, right next to her half-eaten slice of apple pie. "What is this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even, trying not to accuse, just inquire. It came out flatter than I intended. Jolene picked up the paper, her brow furrowing immediately. Peregrine, who'd been heading to the living room, paused, noticing the sudden silence. He came back to the table, eyes on Jolene's face. "Reese, where did you get this?" Jolene's voice was barely a whisper. Peregrine, though, he just scoffed, a little too loudly. "Oh, that old thing. Probably some error, Jolene. You know how these companies are." "An error?" "Peregrine. It has my name on it. From when I was 17. My voice cracked a little at the end. That was it. The dam broke. Jolene looked at Peregrine, a look that conveyed years of unspoken disappointments. Peregrine avoided her gaze, shifted his weight. "Look, Reese, it's not what you think," Peregrine started, running a hand through his thinning hair. We needed a little help. Business was slow, and you were a minor, so we needed a co-signer. It was just a formality. Jolene and I signed all the papers, too. It was mostly our names on it. Just for the bank, you know? To get the loan processed." "A formality? You signed my name to a mortgage when I was 17? Without telling me?" The anger was a hot wave, suddenly. "That's not a formality, Dad. That's fraud." Jolene put a hand on my arm, her face pale. "Reese, please, let's calm down. It was years ago. We paid it. Or we were paying it. It was for the house. To keep the house, when things got tight after Peregrine's big project fell through. The one with the... Remember?" I remembered. Peregrine had poured a year into a massive concert venue sound system design. Unpaid upfront work, promises of a huge payout. It had fallen apart. The developers had gone bankrupt. This was just after I started my final year of high school. I'd seen them stressed, but never knew the extent. But why me? Why not just remortgage it yourselves? Peregrine sighed, a deep put-upon sound. They wouldn't. Our credit, it was not great. And the bank said if we had a third party, someone with a clean slate, it would be easier. And you were technically almost 18. It was just a workaround. He said workaround like it was a clever solution, not a deceptive maneuver. That night I didn't sleep. I paced my old bedroom, the floorboards creaking. I tried to call my older cousin, Leif, who works in finance, but it was too late. I just kept thinking about Peregrine's easy dismissal, Jolene's quiet desperation. This wasn't just about money. It was about trust. A fundamental betrayal. A few days later, I drove to see Leif. He lived an hour away in a more suburban town. His house neat, tidy, and smelling faintly of disinfectant. Leif, who's pushing 40 now, is all straight lines and careful planning. He listened patiently as I recounted the conversation, the details from the statement. He ran a hand through his already perfectly combed hair, his expression grim. "Reese, this is serious," he said, pushing his glasses up his nose. "If they signed your name, or forged your signature, or had you signed something without fully explaining what it was while you were a minor, that's a huge problem. It could completely wreck your credit. And you're liable for this debt. All of it. Not just a third. All of it." "But they said it was paid," I mumbled, clinging to that. "They said they were paying it?" This statement clearly shows a significant outstanding balance. And it's overdue. It's escalating. The interest alone is probably astronomical by now. You need to get to the bottom of this. Get all the original paperwork. Every single document. His words were like little hammers, hitting against the fragile wall of denial I'd been building. The next few weeks were a blur of growing tension. Jolene was mostly silent, withdrawn. Peregrine became defensive, often disappearing to his workshop, the door firmly shut, the faint smell of solder and old wood drifting out. I tried to talk to them to get more details. "Dad, I need to see the original documents, the loan agreement," I pleaded one evening. We were in the kitchen, Peregrine picking at a hangnail. "It's all taken care of, Reese. Don't you worry your head about it. We're working it out," he said, still not looking at me. "Just leave it." "Leave it? It's my name on this. My financial future." "What do you mean, taken care of?" My voice was rising. I could feel it. Jolene came in then, from the living room. "Peregrine, Reese is right. We need to show him. We need to explain," she said softly, her voice strained. "Explain what, Jolene?" "That we did what we had to do to keep a roof over his head." "Over our heads?" Peregrine finally snapped, turning to face both of us. His face was red, his usual jovial mask gone. "You think this was easy? You think we wanted to do this?" That night ended with Peregrine stomping off to his workshop, slamming the door, and Jolene dissolving into quiet tears at the kitchen table. I felt torn. A mixture of rage at Peregrine, sympathy for Jolene, and a deep, cold fear for myself. This wasn't just a family secret. It was a looming disaster. I started digging on my own. I called the lending company, pretending to be my dad, giving them the loan number. They wouldn't give me details, obviously, but they did confirm that the loan was tied to the property, originated 13 years ago, and yes, it was indeed delinquent, severely delinquent. They mentioned a notice of intent to foreclose. Foreclose. That word hung in the air like a guillotine. A week later, another incident. I was driving Jolene to her weekly art group. She does pottery now, trying to find some joy. She seemed particularly down. "Reese," she began, her voice barely audible over the hum of the engine. "Do you remember that time when Peregrine lost all that money on the internet startup? Before that, he'd already taken out a second mortgage on the house. Said it was for business expansion for his new studio equipment. I thought it was paid off. But then, after the startup, he came to me. He needed more. The banks wouldn't lend to us. His credit was shot. Mine too, because we were married." She paused, her eyes on the passing scenery, but not really seeing it. "He just kept saying, 'We need to keep the house, Joe. It's for Reese's future.' He said you wouldn't even know, that it was just a temporary thing. A bridging loan until his next big project." The pieces started to click into place, a horrifying mosaic. That temporary thing had become a permanent fixture. That bridging loan was still there, my name anchoring it, unknowingly, for 13 years. The lies, the half-truths, the evasion. It wasn't just Peregrine being Peregrine. It was a pattern, deep and insidious, and I was trapped right in the middle of it. The scope of their deception, Peregrine's complete disregard for financial reality, and Jolene's enabling silence was becoming terrifyingly clear. And it was all converging on one outcome: the potential loss of the only home I'd ever known, with my own name attached to the very debt that would cause it. The notice of intent to foreclose had been a gut punch, but it still felt abstract. A legal threat, easily dismissed by Peregrine as just paperwork. But the reality of it started to sink in after talking to Leaf, and after that hushed confession from Jolene. I knew I needed more than their vague assurances. I needed the actual documents, all of them. One Tuesday morning, around 11, Peregrine was out at a job interview. A long shot, he called it, for a sound tech position at a community college. Jolene was at her pottery studio. The house was empty, quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator. It felt like an opportune, if illicit, moment. I knew Peregrine had a metal filing cabinet in his workshop. Locked, usually, but sometimes he'd leave it open. He had a habit of putting things away where he thought they were safe, but often forgot to secure them. My stomach churned with a mixture of dread and a grim determination. I needed to see the truth, no matter how ugly. I walked into his workshop, the air thick with the smell of sawdust, old electronics, and stale coffee. Tools lay scattered on his workbench, half-finished projects everywhere. The filing cabinet was tucked in a corner, behind a stack of old record albums. My breath hitched a little when I saw the lock. It wasn't latched. He'd forgotten. Again. A bitter laugh escaped me. Of course he had. My fingers, usually steady, fumbled with the handle. The top drawer slid open with a metallic groan. Inside were folders, haphazardly organized. Taxes 2018, old band demos, appliance manuals. I pushed them aside, rummaging deeper. My eyes scanned for anything with loan, mortgage, or even just bank. And then, tucked under a thick binder of circuit diagrams, I found it. A worn manila folder, simply labeled House. My hands felt clammy as I pulled it out. Inside were several documents, a copy of the original deed, some property tax assessments, and then right there, stapled neatly, was the mortgage agreement, the original one, dated 3 months before my 18th birthday. It named Jolene, Peregrine, and Reese Sterling as co-borrowers. I saw their signatures, and then, below them, a signature that was undeniably mine, or a very good imitation of it. It wasn't exactly right, a little too neat, a little too perfect, but it was close enough to pass, especially if you weren't looking closely. My stomach dropped. It wasn't just my name printed there. It was a forged signature. Not just my name, but my hand, or what was supposed to be my hand, signing away my future without my knowledge. Then, another document. A home equity line of credit taken out 5 years after the first mortgage. Same names. Another forged signature. And then another, a refinance agreement from just 4 years ago, with an even larger principal amount. All of them with my name, all with a signature that was a little too polished to be mine, especially from when I was a clumsy teenager. My vision swam. It wasn't just one loan, it was a series, a cascade of debt, each one piling onto the last, each one leveraging my name, my credit, without me even knowing. The numbers were staggering, 6 figures, all tied to this house, the house I had always considered home. I sat on a rickety stool, the papers spread on the dusty workbench. The drone of a distant lawnmower was the only sound. The weight of it all, the absolute betrayal, pressed down on me. I wasn't just a co-signer on a formality. I was on the hook for hundreds of thousands of dollars. The implications hit me with brutal clarity. Every dream I had, like buying my own place, maybe even starting my own small business, all of it was potentially gone, obliterated by this silent, secret debt. Peregrine returned a few hours later, whistling again. He found me still there, in his workshop, surrounded by the papers. He stopped dead in the doorway, the smile evaporating from his face. His eyes darted from me to the documents spread out, then back to my face. "Reese, what are you doing?" His voice was flat, devoid of its usual warmth. "What am I doing?" I looked at him, the rage finally bubbling over, hot and bitter. "What am I doing?" "What were you doing, Dad? What were you doing for 13 years? Forging my signature? Taking out loan after loan after loan in my name? Did you really think I'd never find out? Did you think I'd just be okay with this?" I picked up the original mortgage document, shaking it slightly. "This isn't my signature, Dad." "Not really. Not when I was 17. How could you? How could you do this to your own son?" He swallowed hard, his gaze dropping to the floor. "Reese, listen. It wasn't like that. We were desperate. We were going to lose the house, and you were so close to 18, it just seemed like a way. We were going to pay it all back. We thought we could. His voice was barely above a whisper. You thought you could. You put my name, my entire financial future on the line because you thought you could, and you let it get to foreclosure warnings. I watched him, searching his face for some sign of genuine remorse, something beyond just getting caught. There was none, just a kind of tired resignation. Jolene walked in then, home from her studio, her hands still faintly dusted with clay. She took in the scene. Peregrine, pale and defeated. Me, trembling with anger. The damning documents splayed out. Her gaze landed on the house folder. Her shoulders slumped. She didn't say a word, just walked slowly over to the counter, her movements heavy, and started to unload her pottery bag, her back to us. Her silence was louder than any shout. I need to know everything, I said, my voice hoarse. Every single loan, every penny. I need to know where the money went, what you did with it, everything, right now. I didn't care that my voice was shaking. I needed answers. And for the first time, Peregrine didn't try to deflect or make a joke. He just sat heavily on the stool, looking utterly defeated, the weight of 13 years of secrets finally crushing him. And that, more than anything, confirmed every terrifying thought I'd had. This wasn't a mistake. This was a pattern, a deliberate, continuous act that had just blown up in all our faces. My face. The immediate aftermath was pure chaos, a maelstrom of yelling, crying, and the kind of stunned silence that feels heavier than any noise. Peregrine, cornered and exposed, finally admitted to everything, not just the first mortgage, but the HELOC, the refinances, the cash advances. He'd lost his job a year ago, yes. But before that, his freelance work had dried up significantly over the past 5 years. The money, he confessed, had gone to cover basic living expenses, to keep the house running, to pay for my college tuition for a couple of semesters, to fund his increasingly desperate attempts at various business ventures that never materialized. It was all a slow, insidious bleed. Jolene just sat there, head in her hands, occasionally interjecting with a, Peregrine, why didn't you just tell me all of it? Or, I thought we were making things work. Her enabling wasn't malicious, but it was just as damaging. The immediate, tangible problem was the house. That notice of intent to foreclose wasn't a bluff. The lending company was serious. Life, bless him, spent hours on the phone with me, advising me to get a real estate lawyer. He knew one, a no-nonsense woman named Aurelia Vance. Meeting Aurelia felt like stepping into a different world. She spoke calmly, clearly, outlining the grim realities. Because my signature was on the documents. Even if forged when I was a minor, the loan was still technically a liability. I could be held responsible for, especially if I'd unknowingly made payments or allowed it to continue for so long. The legal battle would be complicated, expensive, and protracted. My parents, she explained, were looking at potential fraud charges, forgery, not just civil, but criminal. That hit me hard. My parents. The atmosphere in the house became unbearable. Peregrine retreated further, spending his days in his workshop, only emerging for meals, which were eaten in silence. Jolene was a ghost, moving through the house, her eyes perpetually red-rimmed. I felt a suffocating mix of anger, pity, and a crushing sense of responsibility. I couldn't just let the house go to foreclosure, not with my name on it, not when it would absolutely destroy their lives and my own. But how could I fix this? I didn't have hundreds of thousands of dollars. I called my uncle Elias, Peregrine's older brother, a gruff but kind man who lived 2 states over. He'd always been the responsible one in the family. I told him everything, the whole sordid mess. He listened, his voice growing heavier with each detail. Reese, I knew Peregrine was a bit of a flight risk financially. Always has been. But this is beyond the pale. Forging your name, I don't even know what to say. He didn't offer immediate solutions, but he promised to talk to his own financial advisor to see what could be done. The relief of just telling someone outside the immediate orbit was immense. My friends were shocked. My best friend, Sage, who's known me since kindergarten, just kept shaking her head. Reese, this is insane. Your own parents? What kind of parents do that? Her anger on my behalf felt validating, but also highlighted the depth of the betrayal. I felt a profound sense of shame, like I was somehow complicit, even though I knew I wasn't. One evening, about a week after the moment of truth, Jolene found me sitting on the porch steps, staring out at the darkening street. She sat down beside me, slowly. Reese, she started, her voice raspy. I found something else. Peregrine. He took a small loan from my mother. Years ago. She just gave it to him, didn't even ask for repayment. I didn't know he was doing this to us. The U.S. stung. It implied she hadn't been a full participant, just another victim. But her silence, her complicity, in not digging deeper, in accepting his reassurances, it felt like a part of the problem. Aurelia advised us that the immediate priority was to stop the foreclosure. She put a temporary halt on the proceedings, but that only bought us time, maybe a few months. The amount owed, including penalties and interest, was astronomical. The only way out, she said, was to either pay it off or sell the house. Selling the house, my childhood home, felt like a public admission of defeat, a tearing apart of our family history. But it was also the only practical solution. My parents had no assets, no savings. Peregrine was still unemployed. I certainly didn't have that kind of money. The weight of it all, the impending loss of the house, the crumbling of my family, the legal threats, the constant anxiety, it was all consuming. Every potential path forward felt like walking through quicksand. And all of it, ultimately, stemming from that one signature, that one formality, 13 years ago. My entire life, suddenly, felt like it was built on a foundation of lies. It's been 8 months since I found that envelope, since my world tipped sideways. The house is officially on the market now. It's hard, seeing strangers walk through, poking into every corner, judging the paint colors, the old carpet. It feels like they're judging me, judging us. We're aiming for a quick sale, hoping to cover the debt and avoid total financial ruin, especially for me. Aurelia, my lawyer, is still working on the legal implications of the forged signature, trying to argue that my age at the time makes the debt primarily my parents' liability. But it's not a guarantee. There's so much gray area. Peregrine is quieter now. The whistling has stopped. He actually found a part-time job, not in sound engineering, but working at a hardware store. It's a step, I guess, but it barely covers anything beyond his personal expenses. He talks less, looks at me with a kind of resigned sadness I've never seen before. Jolene has moved in with her sister, my Aunt Cadence, for now. She just couldn't bear to be in the house, she said. Not with everything. She's still doing her pottery, trying to find some semblance of peace to you. My relationship with them is fractured. I talk to Jolene more, but it's still strained. With Peregrine, it's mostly practical conversations, devoid of the warmth we once shared. I still love them, of course, but it's a different kind of love now, tinged with a profound disappointment and a lasting mistrust. I'm living with Sage for a bit, in her spare room. It's not ideal, but it's better than the suffocating atmosphere of my old home. My own plans feel suspended. I was saving for a down payment on a small condo, hoping to finally have a place of my own, but that money is now earmarked for potential legal fees, or, God forbid, to cover part of this debt if Aurelia can't untangle me completely. It feels like I'm starting from scratch, but with a massive invisible weight tied to my ankle. What I've learned, it's complicated. I've learned that trust is a fragile thing, easily shattered by the people closest to you. That inaction, or quiet acceptance, can be just as damaging as active deception, and that sometimes the hardest truths are hidden in plain sight, disguised as ordinary family quirks. I used to think I had a pretty good read on people, on life. Now I question everything. I'm grateful for Leif, for Sage, for Aurelia. Their support has been invaluable, a lifeline in this storm. I honestly don't know what I would do without them. The biggest open question, the one that keeps me up at night, is whether I'll ever truly forgive them. Can I rebuild a relationship with parents who did something so fundamentally damaging? And will I ever really feel secure again, financially or emotionally, after this kind of betrayal? Sometimes I wonder if it's even possible to get back to normal, or if normal was just a really convincing illusion all along.